Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's so wonderful to hear you say that back. I cannot tell you how nice that is to have people back in our sanctuary, limited as though we are. It is very sort of overwhelming in some ways to have people here, and God willing, we will continue to grow in numbers as it gets safer to do so. So as I alluded to earlier in the beginning of our service, these past 3 weeks have truly been filled with painful and disturbing news. 3 weeks ago, we witnessed in real time as the terrifying events unfolded in Colleyville, Texas, when an Islamic fundamentalist held Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker and 3 of his congregants hostage for 11 hours. And this past week, we watched television personality Whoopi Goldberg claim that the Holocaust was about man's inhumanity to man and not race. We saw a school board in Tennessee banning Art Spiegelman's painful but essential graphic novel, Mouse, from its curriculum. And just a few days ago, Amnesty International released a biased report that labeled Israel as an apartheid state. And all of these events took place and contributed to an atmosphere where Jewish awareness of anti-Semitism is at a record high. Threats against Jewish institutions of all kinds are on the rise, and we are acutely aware of how easy it is to create an atmosphere of fear in the consciousness of Jews around the world. So tonight, I want to take a moment and I want to address Amnesty International's biased report. Not because I want to give it more publicity or credence, but because it provides a dangerous platform for those who would use its contents and very existence to bolster both anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic agenda. I will begin by stating that there are many policies that are and have been carried out by current and former governments of the State of Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinian people and the territories in which that I live that I personally find to be morally, politically, and strategically reprehensible. Each day that a negotiated settlement between Israel and the Palestinians is not reached further erodes the possibility of creating a two-state solution, which I strongly believe is the only viable pathway to peace. Nonetheless, Amnesty International's report is so biased against the State of Israel that instead of helping to achieve the goal of a negotiated settlement between the two parties, it adds fuel to the one-sided fire of those who wish to demonize and eliminate the Jewish state. It ignores Israel's legitimate right to self-defense and is replete with discredited and inaccurate allegations. It says that Israel is an apartheid state. Apartheid is a racially defined system of governance in which one group imposes its will upon another by denying them basic human rights and segregating them in such a way as to prevent them from participating in and benefiting from the dominant societal mainstream. Now, while there is no question that some of the Palestinian population in Israel and the territories have suffered under occupation, the State of Israel has been very vocal and explicit in providing a pathway towards equity and peaceful coexistence. As my friend and colleague, Rabbi Josh Weinberg, head of ARTSA, the American Reform Zionist Association, writes, "With all that the occupation is, it is not racially motivated, undercutting the fundamental context of the accusation of apartheid. Whatever you may say about Israel's relationship with the treatment of Palestinians, and we have a lot to say about it, it is not based on racial hierarchy, skin color, religious, or ethnic measures. Positioning the conflict in racial terms is not only wrong, but it will likely achieve the opposite and push any resolution to the conflict even further away. And for those of us who've been to Israel and who love Israel, we know that Israeli Arabs are not all segregated. There are Arab members of the governing coalition. There are Arab doctors in hospital, Arab journalists, diplomats, and business people who are active participants in the messy democratic process of governing a pluralistic modern state. The fact that Amnesty International was given access freely to go wherever they wanted, even to come up with their biased conclusions, is further proof of that. Furthermore, while Amnesty International is very vocal in criticizing the policies of the Israeli government, their silence about other nations that are oppressing and murdering people is deafening. Where is the label of apartheid in reference to the slaughter of the Yazidis, the brutal massacres taking place between Shia and Sunni Muslims, and the persecution and re-education of religious groups in the People's Republic of China, to mention just a few of the truly horrific and oppressive regimes around the world? The leaders of the Palestinian people have repeatedly rejected and sabotaged the possibility of a negotiated settlement, preferring instead to launch violent attacks against civilian targets and wage its war in the arena of public opinion. They understand, and this latest slander against Israel is proof, that world opinion is both fickle and short-sighted. The longer that the Palestinians prolong any progress towards peace, the worse it will be for the Jewish state. The more they suffer, the worse Israel looks. Now, it is hard, it is impossible, to succinctly summarize the issues surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. Any attempts to do so in the short time allotted to me this evening will be inadequate. And furthermore, I have personally been the target of abuse from both the right and the left about my public comments against or about Israel. Some on the left have said that by affirming Israel's right to defend herself against Hamas, a terrorist organization whose charter specifically calls for the eradication of the Jewish state and promotes anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, I am directly supporting the genocide of the Palestinian people. I recently received a letter from a longtime member of Temple who said that he is reducing his dues in order to support pro-Palestinian and anti-Zionist organizations, and mentioned that it was because of my words that he is doing this. Okay. And those on the right claim that by pointing out the suffering of the Palestinians under Israeli occupation and detailing the dysfunction of the Israeli political system, I am capitulating to terrorists and not displaying solidarity with Israelis under fire. Okay? And I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the lack of ability to see shades of gray in the quagmire of the Middle East is rapidly destroying any chance for a real peace and a two-state solution in Israel. These kinds of mindless and knee-jerk reactions will only benefit those on the extremes of every side. Let me be perfectly clear. Tonight, as we know, this is the first Erev Shabbat in many weeks that we've been able to worship both in person and online. Those of you who entered our building this evening and presented proof of vaccination, and thank you for doing that and wearing your masks, I appreciate that greatly, also walked past an armed guard. Our extensive and effective security protocols continue to increase due to the heightened atmosphere of tension and documented attacks on Jews here in Denver, around our country, and indeed around the world. This latest report, this slander, will do nothing to deter or prevent further such fears from increasing. My friends, I learned today that tonight marks an auspicious anniversary, the 20th yahrzeit of Daniel Pearl. It's been 2 decades since the Jewish-American journalist was kidnapped and brutally assassinated by Islamic terrorists. His beheading was filmed by his tormentors, and before he died, he cried out, "My father is Jewish, my mother is Jewish, and I am Jewish." These words were seen by his captors as proof of his guilt and the fact that he deserved to die. But for Daniel Pearl and those like us, they were a statement of pride and defiance in the face of bigotry and hatred. Believe me, there are many other topics about which I would have wanted to speak tonight. Chief among them, the fact that the current coalition government in Israel has decided to succumb to pressure and reject the carefully negotiated settlement, creating an egalitarian section of the Western Wall, capitulating to right-wing Jewish fundamentalists in Israel, to whom the concept of pluralism is anathema. We just celebrated Rosh Chodesh Adar 1, the new moon of Adar. And each month on Rosh Chodesh, on the new moon, there's a group called Women of the Wall who gather at the Kotel to pray, to read from the Torah, to celebrate this important milestone. And each month they are violently, verbally, and physically attacked for the sheer gall of wanting to pray together as Jews, as women at the wall. There are many fights I would rather take on than once again calling out and rejecting anti-Semitism under the guise of anti-Zionism. But I have no choice, and we have no choice. We cannot be silent in the face of hatred, of ignorance, and half-truths. We must let our voices be heard as we confront our enemies wherever and whenever they may be. And to that end, I'm going to provide a link, not right now, but later on, both on our Facebook page and in our e-notes and on our temple website, to a petition to sign and to show your individual support of the State of Israel and our absolute rejection of Amnesty International's biased report. Our Board of Trustees is currently looking at it, and Danny, I think they're going to sign it. I am sure they will. And I would ask you to do the same, so that our voices are unified and we can stand up to ignorance, to oppression, and to anti-Semitism. So on this Shabbat, when we come together, when we see hope and the ability to come together, let us also work to end bias within ourselves and within others against us. And let us say, Amen. Shabbat Shalom. And we continue now with Aleinu as we rise physically, spiritually at home, as we go to the Ark.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך